and thank you very much for your time and your comments there. My first question is, we're running about 7 minutes late, so if we went to 12:37, does that inconvenience any of you? Okay, then we're going to eat into our lunchtime in that case. The second thing is that even with that time, with 7 candidates, they'll each only have, if it was fairly shared, 6.5 minutes each. So therefore, I'm going to ask you some quite complicated questions, but limit your answers to 90 seconds, and I am going to be timing. And I'm sorry to be quite ruthless about this, but I'm keen to get through a lot of material here. And one last point, on each question, please, I'm not looking for answers from all 7 of you. You might not have a view, or certainly on the first question, Vic's already given her view. So please don't feel, we need 7 answers to 30 questions. So, is that, we're all right with that? Very good, thank you. My first question is about the Auckland Transport Alignment Project. And as Mayor, would you basically embrace that over, say, the next couple of years, or would you be actively pushing for some big changes, and if so, what? Any takers on that, please? David.
As I've already
No, the microphone's good. Just
okay.
Or sit down.
Oh, yeah, no, I've got to stand.
I'm not. I'll start.
That's 10 seconds.
I'm starting again.
Thank you, Rob. Look, as I said before, it's the right conversation, the right people are sitting around the table. The 4 top priorities don't include reducing carbon emissions. That is an egregious error. We have to go back to the drawing board with this. We have to reprioritise. That's my commitment. I like the process. It's long overdue. And one of my policies is actually to turn this into a joint committee, which is something that local authorities can create under Schedule 7 of the Local Government Act. So that formalises the process, that's making recommendations back to Cabinet and back to Auckland Council that are solid recommendations that have been negotiated, as it were, around the table. And just one more thing on ATAP. It sticks with a gold-plated version of the levels of service of the asset management plan. And I believe that's one reason why there's this $4 billion shortfall. We have to review some of those assumptions about what we spend on maintaining our current high standards on the road if we are going to move to a carbon zero public transport system in the future.
A very pithy 68 minutes, thank you. 7 minutes, thank you. No, it didn't seem that long. Phil.
Yeah. I think ATAP is a step in the right direction, but it hugely underfunds the infrastructure we need to tackle Auckland's problems. And it leaves, for example, mass transit, which is the pseudonym for light rail, into the second 10-year period. So if we don't do something, for example, out to the airport, until after 2029, 2030, we'll be having about 5 million tourists coming into the city at that time. It's just crazy. They'll be gridlocked, they won't be able to get into town, and the rest of us with them. I think that the government's congestion pricing is something that you do need to change behaviour. I don't particularly like it, but I regard it as necessary. Where I'll have a disagreement is I don't believe in the interim transport levy, which puts the same impost on each of you living in Auckland in this room as it does on, say, Sky City. The same impost on me, who drives on the motorway 7 days a week, as my father, who's 95, that doesn't drive at all. I think there has to be a better connection between user pays and funding. But most of all, the government's got to be prepared to build up that infrastructure fund or create infrastructure bonds that we can use and allow us to set a petrol tax if we are to create the infrastructure that will genuinely tackle congestion and increasing gridlock.
Thank you very much indeed, Phil. Excellent 89 seconds. And then Mark.
I think the concept of ATAP was just basic common sense. What I've learned in life, there's not much you can't sort out if you've got the key people in the same room with focused discussion. Madness that didn't happen earlier. What I would like addressed, as I've already said, is investigating making public transport genuinely public again, and cutting out all these private piggies in the middle and this multiplicity of different layers. I mean, imagine if local boards facilitated public meetings with locals who could explain directly to the traffic engineers who are responsible for fixing it what their problems were. That would get results. So, yeah, I do not support road tolls, I do not support user charges, I do not support public-private partnerships. I believe these are all variants of corporate welfare, and I am absolutely opposed to corporate welfare, and I believe the public majority, not a corporate minority, should benefit from our public money. I also believe that we need to make do with what we've got. How could we help to alter congestion, change congestion now by apps where private motorists can carpool? Why has that been not more investigated? And yeah, anyway, but that's quite a major one. And traffic lights. Can we help stop congestion by changing configuration of traffic lights?
Thanks very much, Penny. Mark?
ATAP's much like the three-course meal sitting in the supermarket. It's nice to look at, but if you haven't got the money, it's just nice to look at. That's really the key issue. I mean, really, we're largely aligned on the projects, and my top 10 include most of those ones that have been prioritised: the North Western Busway, the Northern Busway. All these are NZTA principal funders, but we've got issues, and of course Amity coming from Panmure. The critical issue is how do we pay for it? And Phil's motivation, of course, is to tax Aucklanders with his congestion charge that he doesn't control, to put out the cap to government. Whereas I know there's more we can do with our balance sheet. I talked about two aspects of my plan: rewriting the budget, putting more into transport. The other issue that I'm the only mayoral candidate talking about is asset swapping, asking Aucklanders to agree to let me swap half the value of our shares in the Auckland Airport and the port operating business, perhaps $1.2 billion in total, swap those into some of these assets that actually ATAP have identified. They're higher priority assets. The $40 million we'd lose in dividends, adjusting for borrowings from those assets, would be more than compensated while making up for the $1.2 billion in congestion costs that some say it's costing us every year. So the issue is really not about the projects, it's about how do we fund it, and who's got the requisite skills, who's got the ability, the experience, frankly, working in commercial organisations and the understanding of council to make more progress, to actually get the projects done.
Thanks very much, Claire.
I'd hope to see more out of the Auckland Transport Alignment Project, and I too disagree with our current congestion charge and the way that it would operate as a regional fuel tax, because that will disproportionately hit our poorest, who are those who are living on our fringes, who do need to use their cars to get to work, to drop the kids off to school and things like that. If we were to be looking at congestion tax, I think that it should take more the form of some kind of device that we have in our cars that tax people who are coming into the central city at a certain time. I have issues surrounding privacy on that, and also the technology isn't quite there in New Zealand. With regard to funding, right now in the OECD, the average amount of spending that comes from government coffers at a local level is 30%. In New Zealand, it's less than half of that at 11%. So what we have right now is Central, whose budget is looking relatively good, but what we're not seeing is that there are 400,000 new people coming to Auckland every single year, and central government is seeing income from those people. We're seeing the strain on our transport and on our housing, and we really seriously need a redistribution of the funding from Central in order to pay for the infrastructure and the transport that we need. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Let me move on to the next. Oh, Vic. Yeah. Okay.
So for me, ATAP is actually a status quo plan. It doesn't go far enough. It looks like it's been done within the existing budgets, and when you actually put together what NZTA and council were already going to spend, you get a little bit more, but you don't get actually a heck of a lot more than was there. So there's some things that are in there that just need to be brought forwards. The North Western Busway, they're going to build that over 2 decades. We can't wait 2 decades for the busway, a dedicated busway along the northwest. In terms of what congestion will look like, leaving those people without access to public transport is a big problem. So how do you bring forward some of this? For me, public-private partnerships play a big role. In Australia, government have a pipeline of $66 billion of public-private partnerships. Our pipeline is about $2.5–3 billion. You can bring forward the economic benefits of infrastructure by accessing other people's capital. The last point I guess I just want to make is around the user pays type approach. And I think if you're going to take that approach and remove the ITL, then you've got to be consistent. So that then puts question marks around how much ratepayers are subsidising transport in terms of public transport and also the gold card. So I think if you're going to put one user pays principle, does that then mean you're going to look at the other ways that user pays and need to pay across our city? And I think that's really dangerous territory. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
One of the things we need to do is make sure we communicate more. Is this on?
Yeah.
One of the things we have to communicate more. Sure, ATAP is actually quite good because they're coming out and they're saying to council things that we need to do, but council's not listening. We need to really get around the table and get council to listen more. Like I said, we can't be infilling areas when transport is saying we can't do that because we can't get the transport there. You know, if we're talking about how we're going to finance these things, you know, you look at the satellite city that I talked about building, which does create a plan, so we understand where we can put the schools, the police, the fire department, the ambulance, the hospital, and the infrastructure by planning that. Right now, we have the developers planning our future. We can't do that. We need to plan. But how do we fund something like that? You know, we're going to struggle because we don't have enough money. We're going to need to spend $500 million a year just to try not to have the transport really come to a stop with our congestion. But how do we fund something like that? You know, we have such an amazing opportunity here in Auckland. Our property values are skyrocketing. What we should be doing is taking those areas, acquiring that land, rezoning it, putting the infrastructure in there, and then divvying it up and selling it to developers while we recoup all the infrastructure. That's how we need to grow. That's what Sir Barry Curtis used to do in Manukau all the time. That's why Manukau owned a lot of land. They used to buy it before it was rezoned. And we need to take advantage of that. That's what we need to do to actually build our infrastructure. Thank you.